Hey there! When your journey to recovery starts to feel like a maze with no exit, how do you find the path forward? Today's guest, Sarah Falter in Germantown, Wisconsin in the US, discovered a unique approach that thankfully has led to her being almost fully recovered. If you're new here, I'm Raelan. If you're not, welcome back to the channel where each week we explore a new ME/CFS or long COVID recovery story. It's all about learning from each other, finding effective strategies, and carving out our own paths. Today, Sarah's going to take us through her journey, which actually began for her in early childhood. And her recovery story will be an eye-opener for so many that believe that ME/CFS is an illness that only affects those type A overachiever types, because Sarah actually feels that she is completely the opposite. You are going to absolutely love her. She is amazing, and I'm so excited for you to hear her story. Sarah, so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, for sure. Nice to see you, Raelan. Thank you so much for having me.
You have had an incredible journey, and I cannot wait to hear all about it. So take us back. How did this all start for you?
So I'm actually somebody who had chronic fatigue even as a child. So I would fall asleep in class and all throughout my childhood. And even in college, I remember trying to stand up in the back of class just to stay awake or drinking tons of coffee. But my acute onset of chronic fatigue and chronic pain was probably 5 or 6 years ago. After I stood up to my mother for the first time ever. And then a week or two later, I got shingles. And after that, I got all these symptoms of tons of pain on just the right side of my body that never went away, and extreme fatigue. So I ended up in bed a ton, and that was the beginning of it.
What did you think was happening?
I mean, at first I thought it was something to do with the shingles because I had chosen not to take whatever the doctor gave me, like the antibiotic or whatever. And I thought, okay, this will just resolve. But as weeks and then months went by and I realized nothing was helping, I didn't know what to think. I thought for sure something was physically wrong. And so I started running to doctors. So my primary care physician, and then she sent me to a neurologist. I ended up at a neurosurgeon, tried physical therapy, chiropractic, nothing helped. So it was like running around to doctors and eventually feeling like nothing helped.
And then what?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, they did an MRI of my brain and also of my spine and found something called Chiari, Chiari, Chiari malformation, as a possible thing that could be going on. And that's why I was sent to the neurosurgeon. Chiari is kind of where your brainstem goes down too far into your neck, I believe. But the neurosurgeon said I did not present other patients that he had. So he basically was like, I'll operate on you if you want. This is brain surgery we're talking about, but it may or may not help with your symptoms. And it could cause additional difficulties. So I said, no, definitely not. And I went back to my primary care doctor and she was like, yeah, of course, don't get that. But it was just this exasperating thing of thinking I had to have brain surgery and then realizing, no, I don't, and just sort of giving up for a while. So I just started sleeping all the time and trying to fix it with rest, but that didn't solve things either.
So had you been working at the time? Were you able to keep working?
I eventually couldn't even work. So at the time that it started, I was working and I would be doing things that were slightly unsafe, like pulling over and sleeping in my car just to get my energy level up, maybe guzzling caffeine, whatever I could do. At my psychiatrist at the time, he gave me something called Provigil for narcolepsy to try to stay awake. But I found that to be addictive, so I got off that pretty much right away. So it was nothing helped. And eventually I was so exhausted and in so much pain that I just had to stop working. And then I was just home, laying in bed, laying on the couch, doing very, very little.
Such a stressful thing to go through. I can just picture you pulling over and having to rest or having to sleep. And I remember when I was trying to work, I would have to lock the door in my office. And it's quite small and there wasn't really any room on the floor. So I just laid down on the top of my small desk and would just try and take a nap and hope that I wasn't going to get caught. And it's just what a crazy way to live. Each day is so hard to get through. And on top of that, you really have no idea what's going on or how long it's going to last or if it's going to get worse.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy making. Like I just could not figure it out and doctors couldn't seem to figure anything out. The symptoms that I was having was like my whole right side. It was a headache that never went away, like all this face tension and like weakness in my right hand. So I went and got that checked out and it wasn't carpal tunnel or anything. And my extremities were extremely cold even in summer, like icy hands even in summertime. So it's just nobody could figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. And so I just kind of hid out for a while until I realized that wasn't working either. Like laying around all the time wasn't solving anything either.
So it doesn't sound like the doctors they had maybe some theories, but you hadn't been diagnosed with anything. There was no treatment plan given to you.
Yeah, like the Chiari was a potential thing, but then that totally fell flat where it didn't seem like it was really the answer. My primary care diagnosed me with SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, because my heart started like racing at times. I could wake up out of sleep and have a racing heartbeat. But she said it wasn't dangerous and like it wasn't like I could take a pill and then be better and have all my symptoms go away or anything. So I started to wonder, like, am I dying? I was just having these crazy thoughts, like, should I get my affairs in order? Like, I didn't know what to think. And no, they didn't have any answers.
And what did your family, your friends, or people around you, what were they thinking, or how did they react to all of this?
I think they didn't know what to do either. Like, I would talk about it to them in the beginning, but then honestly, I stopped talking about it because it just didn't seem to go anywhere. And their reaction was more like, well, have you took this action or that one? And I already was trying my hardest and taking as many actions as I could. So it made me feel worse. So I stopped talking about it and just isolated for a while.
Yeah, and I don't know if you found that it seems like people want good news, and I always want to give them good news. So I found myself in a place of saying, yeah, yeah, I think I'm getting better, or this is working, and it just, but then a year would pass, and I hadn't changed, and I'm still giving the same kind of BS responses. So then you just,
Mhm.
yeah, just kind of stop.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing.
So when the doctors weren't giving you much, did you end up on the same path as so many other of us, where you just start Googling and like trying to figure out what to do on your own?
Yeah, it was like I hit a point where I realized, okay, I have to just take this into my own hands or I will just never get better. And I still didn't really think that I could get better because I'm not a doctor. Like, how am I going to heal myself? But yeah, I did had to, I feel like it was like I had to hit some sort of bottom with it where I realized I have to take things into my own hands. And then, yeah, I was Googling everything left and right, trying, maybe alternative practices, things with diet, like anything I could do to help.
And did any of these things start to make you feel better or worse?
Well, one thing that was helpful was actually the worksheet you had. Like you have a free printed thing to track what you do in the day. So basically, I would say it started with this video from Barbara O'Neill that I watched, which was just more approachable to me. Because I had tried, in addition to the doctors, like I had signed up for this health program that was really expensive through Dr. Pam Popper. And I know it's like a wonderful program, but I wasn't, it wasn't like my solution at the time. That was about like whole food plant-based eating and like all this health information. It was just overwhelming. I wasn't actually in a place to like be able to absorb all of that. But this Barbara O'Neill video was just like short, right? And so it was like get sun in the morning. And maybe it was like eat this way or do, a few simple things like for sleep hygiene. And somehow I was like, okay, I'm just going to take these actions. I don't know what it was about her video, but it got me going the right direction. I had also tried, Dan Nofer's ANS Rewire program, which is awesome, except at the time, like it was beyond me. Like my brain just couldn't comprehend it. And it was like too much information. So I found that really short videos were what were helpful. So like watching your interviews with people, yeah, your sheets that you can print out and write like what you're doing in a day, hour by hour. That was helpful to me because I started to see that like the little bit of energy I had in a day was sometimes being wasted or like I was doing things that wasn't exactly directly going after my recovery and healing. So changing some of those things around, like eliminating things that weren't totally necessary, that was helpful.
Yeah, and I can link that in the video description if people want to take a look. It's just essentially a system for figuring out how much usable energy you actually have in a day and then taking a look at where that's going and then seeing, okay, how much of this is going towards things that are actually helping me recover and maybe identifying some of those energy vampires too. Now I do something, and this is, like a downloadable. Some people like old school paper. You can write things down. These days I do similar things just with a blank Google Calendar, but I think it can be really helpful. And you don't have to do it every week. It doesn't have to become this big chore, but even just for 1 week can give you a snapshot of what your days look like. And I still find it really helpful to do that.
Yeah, that was super helpful because one of my approaches earlier on was just lay around, like get as much rest as possible. And then once that wasn't working, I was like, okay, push myself really hard, but then I would crash. So like, for example, I would go volunteer on my daughter's horse farm for like 2 hours maybe, and then I'd be done for the entire day. So that was an example of something from those worksheets that I was like, okay, let's just cut that out for now and choose maybe a walk in the sunshine early in the morning to like try to help my circadian rhythm or whatever some of these basic things are for directly for recovery,
Yeah, and I can't remember if I incorporated it into that specific one, but another helpful thing someone taught me about on this channel was the idea of, your activity bookends. Like, what if you're doing something really busy, if it's a walk for however long, what are you doing right after and what are you doing right before? And I still do this to this day because we have a habit to just stack busy on top of busy on top of busy. Even when we're not feeling well, that might look different. It might be washing the dishes and doing the laundry back to back without taking a rest. But yeah, just a lot of people don't find it super helpful to really zero in too much on things like pacing and get obsessed over charts and did I do too much? But I think having a bit of a system and a general flexible plan is really important because if you keep pushing yourself and then having those massive symptom flares, it's really hard to keep going when your body is in such a bad state and it's hell to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
So where did you go for, okay, you're here now, doing amazing. So
Yeah.
what slowly started to get you from there to here?
Yeah, I would say my path was, well, to be honest, like I went through a divorce and that I feel like was part of my healing because it just wasn't the right relationship for me. I also started doing something called Isha Judd system, which is like it's meditation, but it's also like expressing your feelings. So I feel like I was somebody who just wasn't like living my authentic life. And so learning how to do that and how to express feelings, because like we'll literally do meetings where you can cry, you can punch a pillow, whatever, like getting all that out was helpful. But it didn't like take away the fatigue and pain, but it did feel really important and helpful. The thing that was my biggest help, honestly, was less than a year ago, I discovered something called Soma breath. So breath work ended up being the thing that like launched me forward and made me have a huge jump in energy and reduction in pain. So that was my biggest thing, but all those things led up to it,
We hear a lot about breath work. What exactly does that entail, and what is it about it that makes it helpful for some people?
Yeah, so I mean, the particular kind I do, the Soma breath, which I'm sure all breath work is wonderful. It has like rhythmic breathing, so you're breathing in beats to music, and also breath holding, which it turns out, I didn't know this, but like holding your breath for a little bit each day, it's called intermittent hypoxic training, is actually physically helpful. Like proven scientifically, physically helpful. It's about like as you hold your breath, the carbon dioxide builds up in your body and it helps oxygen get where it needs to go. So like most of us actually overbreathe. I didn't know any of this, but I find it really interesting now that I benefited so greatly from it. A lot of us overbreathe and oxygen can get stuck to our red blood cells. And when you hold your breath and carbon dioxide builds up a little bit, it can release that and the oxygen gets where it's really needed in your body, especially those of us who are like depleted. And also it can even like circulate stem cells and, help regenerate healthy cells in your vital organs. So, I mean, there's just a lot of benefits to it. So, and coupled with meditation. So I feel like for me, and maybe for many others, Soma breath is great because it captures those people who like have a hard time committing and are resistant, right? So like it's hot, some of us maybe do it easily and then some of us don't. Like we don't roll out of bed and meditate for an hour. this practice, there's so much to focus on with the music and guided meditation and breath work that it's fun. And and it made me do it every single day. And so then I reaped the benefits of the meditation and also of the breath work. So that was my biggest help.
Sounds incredible. I'm definitely gonna have to give that a try. So you had mentioned before when you and I were talking that there were some things that you had to let go of to recover. So what did that look like?
Yeah, for me, I feel like I really had to let go of old patterns, old programming. So I think of, us as having kind of a computerized program in our brain. Like we all just absorb whatever as a child and kind of run those programs throughout life. So I had to really update some of that programming that wasn't helpful. Let go of resentments. Like when I felt like at my worst with this, maybe 4 years ago or so, I really thought I might be dying. Like, and I don't think it was hypochondria. Like I really thought I might be. And what I find is that some parts of me did need to die. I know that sounds really dramatic, but I'm talking about like old patterns, right? Like negative thinking. Yeah, I had to take responsibility and kind of just let go of some things that were really still bothering me, it turns out, like from childhood. So that was important as well.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And I did something similar and I just wrote down a list of all of the things that I realized I was still carrying, the things that just would pop up in my mind in quiet moments and had never really given myself permission to deal with because I'm like, oh, that's from 20 years ago, or that's from when I was a teenager, or it wasn't even that big of a deal. I just kind of keep shoving it down, shoving it down. You don't realize how much you're carrying. And
Yeah.
many of us, I don't think until recently, understood how that impacts our health and symptoms in
Mhm.
our body. So definitely a theme I'm hearing from a lot of people that I interview here, for sure.
Yeah. I also feel like in hindsight, like firing the fight or flight response constantly since childhood, because I'm somebody who suffered with a lot of anxiety. It kind of only makes sense to me now that it would manifest physically in my body, because it is a physical process, right? Like when you fire that. So yeah, I just want to extend hope to everybody who has anxiety as well. Like you totally can recover. So I know it's a difficult process and like some of the basic things, like I mean, I did change my diet, like whole food plant-based. I tried fermented foods. I did feel like those were helpful. I was having gut issues. I did work on my sleep hygiene. All those things are important. It's just, I don't feel like I launched forward. I didn't feel that big improvement and hope until the breath work, but I know it's different for everyone.
So I know you've also talked about how there's a definite impression out there that, and I'm partly responsible for this, putting this message out, that primarily people who get these sorts of conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID and so forth are these overachiever, type A, go-getters, just really intense sort of people, and you do not identify with that at all. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that and wondering kind of how the anxiety all ties in with all of that.
Yeah, so I mean, like I had chronic fatigue even as a child, and looking back, I think of it as like maybe it was something physically going on, but also I was extremely unhappy. Like I just so happened to have been born into a family and school and everything where like it just wasn't right for me. It just didn't get like my needs met. So I feel like that also contributed to my fatigue because I think it's so important to have like be validated, be reflected, and I just didn't have that. So my childhood felt very, sleepy and fatigued and unhappy. And so when I hear recovery stories of people who are just like, they were doing great and they were doing 10 sports and, whatever, I just am like, wait a minute, but that wasn't me. And so like, as I recover from this, I'm like, I'm not back to how I was. I wonder if I'm further than I was. And I wonder how much further yet I could go because that was my starting place. So I just want to reach out to people like that who maybe don't identify with that exact, I don't know, personality that you can recover to and like your highest potential maybe way beyond what you used to be even before you got sick. But now that I hear you talk, I do want to admit that like there are some of those traits that I do relate to. So like I can be very like perfectionistic or I don't know, like I was very serious always and yeah, I can just I can relate to some of those traits, but just not like overall personality wise. So I just wanted to share that in case anybody relates to that.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I've seen how it's been alienating for some people when I look at the comments on some of the videos. Like, I don't see myself in any of these interviews. But more and more, we're starting to see that it's not just type A overachiever people, it's also people who have some level of childhood trauma, whether that be big T or little t trauma, things that they're carrying around, or people who have had anxiety, which is essentially, going through life with fear, which is going to be triggering your fight or flight response, or people who are chronic caregivers and putting everyone else's needs before their own. I mean, long term, that's going to have an impact on your functioning. So I think we've oversimplified it a bit. We do see a lot of those sort of type A people, but it's definitely not everybody. So,
Yeah.
most people don't neatly fit into one or the other. We can have little pieces of different things that kind of make up who we are.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it's not always as clean of a story, and I'm sure everybody fits into bits and pieces. But yeah, that anxiety path to chronic fatigue, I think that might be an additional one. The type A into it, and also maybe anxiety leads to it too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think anxiety is really tightly woven in with a lot of the type A, the more we read and understand about it, is a lot of it comes out of that perfectionism can come out of shame. It's like, if I'm not perfect, I'm not good enough, which causes anxiety. And it's I think it's a bit more complicated of a scenario than we once realized. So looking back or reflecting on all of this, are there any other things that you see now that were big in contributing to help you to recover?
Yeah, getting into the relationship that I have today and have been in for several years actually was super healing to me. Like, to me, right or wrong, I experienced it as like getting my childhood needs met. And so, like, finding the correct relationship after I've actually been divorced twice, was crucial because I had really thought, I'm just going to go at life alone. And I didn't feel sad about it. But then when I found the right person where it was like, oh no, I can be my real self and be in a relationship and have my needs met and like in the right relationship, basically, it was super healing too, because it helped me relax, and just be able to have that.
Yeah, it's something that I don't give enough credit to. I didn't even start thinking about it until people who watch these videos started kind of calling me out on it in the comments. But yeah, I finally recovered when I met my now husband, and he was incredibly supportive, and I felt very safe with him, and he took care of all of our, finances, and he was just very stable and reliable and, a loving, caring person, which of course is going to be a game changer. Before that, I was by myself and financially very unstable and lonely and not feeling safe and isolated. I mean, I had friends, but it's, yeah, it's one of those things that I think a lot of us just take for granted, but it can be massive. So
Yeah, it really was. It was massive for me. I guess my thing was I needed to be heard. And of course, everyone likes to be heard, but it was much deeper than that. Like, I wasn't raised that way. I was kind of like not raised to trust me, right? I had to learn how to trust me and then have that reflected and supported and just be heard, deeply and have a deep emotional connection. So yeah, it's been great.
That's incredible. So, what would you want to offer as hope for other people who are currently facing this?
Yeah, I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for people who have struggled with both anxiety and panic attacks, as well as even self-hate, because those are things that I have struggled with. And so coming to a place of being able to love yourself, is amazing. So as hope to others, like, if you are struggling with those things, you really can get better. We can work on the physical stuff for sure, of like chronic fatigue and pain, but also that emotional stuff can be really healing. So there are, of course, many ways to go after that. To me, I used the Isha Judd system, and then currently the Soma breath has been absolutely revolutionary. So I just can't help but like I don't want to be selling it or like pushing it, but I just can't help but like hope that if you're struggling, hey, why not try breath work of any variety? It doesn't have to be mine, or you know what I mean? But yeah, I want to extend that to people, that there just really is hope. Like, I didn't think I would get better, and I did, and you can too.
And you now, or what does life look like for you now? How has this changed how you're living your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed completely. So, like, I don't think I'm dying anymore. I don't, I'm not 100%. I'm maybe like 90% recovered, right? Like, I do have fatigue. I do have pain sometimes, but it's kind of like I don't care. I can live my life again. I basically feel like I have new life, to be honest. Like, my old life, I had to kind of let go of. It was pretty much dwindling anyway. And I also think it's super important to find your passion, or at least it was for me. Like when this Soma breath hit me so hard, I actually decided to become an instructor. And now I'm doing something in my life that I want to get up and do in the morning, like it's so exciting and so fun, so fulfilling. So my life looks like working, but getting to do like the thing I love, and I have energy for my children. It's just amazing after, I think some of us who recover, we can really appreciate life more for having been sick because we know what it's like for it to be removed, and not be able to do anything or enjoy anything.
It's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And what, children?
Yeah.
Why did that not come up yet?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Nightmare to go through without children. So that had to add a whole other layer of complexity and struggle for you and
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, it definitely did. Probably didn't come up because I probably still carry some guilt, but probably just need to let go of it, and just really live in the moment is important and just give what I can to them now. But we struggled through. I had to get lots of help with my kids. Now they're older. They were both teenagers. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's good. I'm glad you brought it up because I know there are a lot of parents watching and it can feel like, how am I ever going to do this with children?
Yeah.
It's hard enough without, but lots of parents do it. I'm sure it's not easy, but doable. All right, Sarah, I am so happy for you. I'm so glad we met. You have such an incredible energy. You just are very humble and just like seem like a very kind and good person. And I'm sorry you've had to go through all this, but it's amazing to see where you are now. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to do this today and share your story because I know it's going to mean a lot to a lot of people out there. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Just want to reach out to people and let you know you can recover too. There's definitely hope.
For those of you watching, if you're interested in the breathwork coaching that Sarah does, that of course will be linked in the video description. So definitely expand that description and take a look at what we've got linked there for her because she's clearly an amazing person who will have a sense of what you're going through and has a lot of insight and things to offer. And I also want to send a quick shout out to our channel member, Patty Hansen. Thank you, Patty, for joining and supporting the channel. Becoming a channel member, it helps to continue to make all these interviews possible and keep this channel going long term and keep supporting our community. So, and thank you to all of you watching as well. Always looking forward to your comments, always sending big, massive hugs to you. I hope you are finding what you need. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got tons out of it. And I hope to see you in one of these next ones that I'll link up here that I think that you might like.